there's a new virus related to swine meat that has been detected in the Dominican Republic. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture is already taking measures to make sure it doesn't get into any U.S. jurisdiction. Our Christian Ramos brings us this report.
If you're visiting Puerto Rico for the Christmas, you need to know that you will not be able to bring back home any pasteles, morcillas, or pork-related products to avoid the spread of the African swine fever.
The African swine fever virus is a virus that affects swine, basically wild and domestic swine, and it's a very contagious disease that causes a lot of mortality. It was diagnosed in the Dominican Republic on the 28th of July, and it doesn't affect, so we don't have it in Puerto Rico or in the United States or Virgin Islands. Right now we are trying to make sure that it doesn't get introduced into Puerto Rico, which is at higher risk compared to other places because of our proximity and some of our activities, but that it also doesn't get to the mainland U.S.
As part of the efforts to respond to the detection of African swine fever in the Dominican Republic and prevent its introduction into the United States, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, the U.S. Department of Agriculture established a foreign animal disease protection zone in Puerto Rico and the USVI.
USDA issued a federal order restricting the movement of swine meat, and swine byproducts from Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands into the U.S. mainland. It is very common that Puerto Rican cultures like to bring a little bit of the flavor or the savor of Puerto Rico to your relatives into the U.S. mainland. So it's very, very common. All pasteles are prohibited, and very famous blood sausage is prohibited. Any part that has any meat, any swine meat. Chicharrones are prohibited. Longaniza prohibited. Chinese rice is prepared with pork. So don't try to bring any kind of meat or any byproducts that are related to swine.
African swine fever is a highly contagious and deadly viral disease affecting both domestic and feral swine of all ages. It's not a threat to human health and cannot be transmitted from pigs to humans.
It could potentially be devastating to the economy, to the pork industry, if it were to be introduced, and that's why we are going through all these measures.
Although the virus has not been detected in Puerto Rico, the airport is taking the measures to avoid the spread on the island. Reporting from San Juan, Puerto Rico, Christian Ramos.
All right, thanks, Christian. Well, meantime, leaders of several Caribbean countries gathered recently at the UN General Assembly. Now they're calling on world leaders to do more to fight climate change and, in turn, to help especially the small islands, which are often the hardest hit by the impacts of climate change. Our One Caribbean News' Deandra Hamilton reports.
Caribbean country leaders are calling on the UN member states to embrace the totality of multinationalism, to stop making plans while absconding assignments, and to ensure there is greater equity when it comes to smaller countries and their millions of people not being left behind or left out. Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, was blunt.
And how much more must sea levels climb in small island developing states before those who profited from the stockpiling of greenhouse gases contribute to the loss and damage that they occasioned, rather than asking us to crowd out the fiscal space that we have for development to cure the damage caused by the greed of others? And how many more hurricanes must destroy, locusts devour, and islands submerge before we recognize that $100 billion in adaptation is simply not even enough?
Caribbean countries make the least impact on the radical climate changes, but are on the front line when it comes to suffering the hardest hits. Bahamas Prime Minister Philip Davis, reflecting on Hurricane Dorian's lingering effects, may have only been 9 days on the job, but called on the world's leaders to do more than talk.
We had to say that big and radical change is the only response that can save our country. We are out of time. We stand with the CARICOM countries and small island development states to remind the world that those who are hit hardest by the impact of climate change are the least responsible.
Leaders were speaking at the 76th UN General Assembly held over the weekend in New York.
And that was our Deandra Hamilton reporting there. Meantime, the Antigua and Barbuda government is aiming to get 80% of its population vaccinated before lifting almost all existing COVID restrictions. Currently, more than 42,000 people have been vaccinated in the Twin Islands.
Cabinet has looked at what is the ideal number target by which we will then lift the remaining restrictions. And we have set the target at 80,000. Every particular day is going to count from here and hopefully to the end of the year when we move closer and closer to that target.
And the minister, Nicholas, he said the population can be assured of more freedom and that the country's economic situation will improve when that target is reached.
When we get to that coveted number of 80,000 persons fully vaccinated, then there will be no need for us to have either the curfew or many of the restrictions. The only thing that we think we will keep as a saving requirement would be for us to maintain social distancing and wearing masks and sanitizing. Those things would be for us for a very, very long time to come. But in terms of the level of socialization and the level of economic and commercial activity that will prevail, certainly people could go back to a lifestyle and a level of freedom and social engagement that they have become accustomed to. So the promises there clearly help us to get to the 80,000, and we will all enjoy the benefits of getting to that number so that we can all resume a new level of normalcy and with peace and ease.
And as of Thursday, Antigua and Barbuda reported 980 active COVID-19 cases. In the meantime, an urgent call to pregnant women after thousands who are expecting have been hospitalized or have died from COVID-19. The CDC says get vaccinated now. Mandy Gaither has a look at what prompted this renewed recommendation.
A warning to pregnant women.
You could protect yourself, your pregnancy, and your fetus by getting vaccinated.
The renewed urgency comes as the CDC says only 31% of pregnant people have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. In a health alert, the agency added that as of September 27th, there have been more than 125,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases in people who are pregnant, including 22,000 hospitalized and more than 160 deaths. 22 died in August alone, the agency said. The warning extends to those who have recently given birth, those trying or planning to become pregnant, and those who are breastfeeding.
What we don't want to do is see women who for some reason or other are hesitant to get vaccinated when they're pregnant or wanting to get pregnant and then have a negative impact on their pregnancy.
The risk isn't only to the mother. The CDC says COVID-19 in pregnancy can cause preterm birth or babies born so sick they have to go straight to the neonatal intensive care unit. The agency also says other adverse pregnancy outcomes such as stillbirth have been reported and stresses the safety of the vaccine.
We now have data that demonstrates that vaccines in whatever time in pregnancy or lactating that they're given are actually safe and effective and have no adverse events to mom or to baby.